Car maker GM is closing plants and cutting jobs. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Bretter.
And I'm John Jessup. Well, in a surprising move, General Motors is announcing massive layoffs and plant closures in North America.
And in true Trump form, the president took to Twitter late this afternoon to express his displeasure with the decision, tweeting, "Very disappointed with GM. We are now looking at cutting all GM subsidies." CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn with more. Ben?
Well, Jenna and John, earlier this year, General Motors warned President Trump's trade policies would result in job losses right here in the U.S. But now GM says the layoffs have nothing to do with increased tariffs, but simply that some cars are just not selling. As a result, the auto giant is halting production at 5 plants in Michigan, Maryland, Ohio, and even Canada. They also plan to cut around 15% of its workforce, which equates to more than 14,000 jobs. 8,000 of the cuts expected to be white-collar workers. Now the White House responded to this news during a press briefing, which I attended a short time ago.
There's great disappointment there. There's disappointment that it seems like GM would rather build its electric cars in China rather than in the United States.
I just spoke with Steve Moore, who was one of President Trump's top economic advisors during his campaign, for his take on the GM decision. Take a listen.
It's certainly sad news for the families and the workers that are going to be affected. The latest estimate is somewhere around more than 10,000 workers. And so, that's always sad news for people who are going to lose their jobs. But we should also keep this in a broad national perspective. And the good news is, although sometimes we see plant closings, and that's the natural course of events in a market-based economy, since Donald Trump was elected, we've created nearly 1 million manufacturing and construction jobs. So we're not losing these blue-collar jobs. We're gaining them. So for every plant like this that is closing, we're seeing 10 or 20 new plants being opened up all over the country.
So, Steve, you're talking about a pretty strong economy. Do announcements like this contradict that?
Well, we don't like to see this, of course, and the auto industry is very important to Donald Trump. Those auto workers were Trump voters, right? Mm-hmm. And so he cares a lot about them and their families. So I hate to see headlines like this of a plant closing. But again, for every plant that's closed in the country these days, we're seeing literally, dozens opened up. I mean, everywhere you go across the country, you're seeing a lot of these blue-collar jobs coming back, whether it's in the mining industry or whether it's in construction or whether it's in manufacturing. And so, in fact, a lot of the employers say they can't find enough workers to work on the lines and working in these plants. So bad news certainly for Ohio and Michigan that will be affected, but the rest of the country is seeing a lot of robust job growth. In fact, even Ohio and Michigan have seen a lot of job growth. The unemployment rate is very low in both of those states. So the good news is those workers will be able to find new jobs.
GM says, look, this is just business. We're moving away from sedans, smaller cars, moving towards trucks and electric. President Trump, he's a business guy. Why does he take this so personally?
He takes it personally because he cares about those workers. Those are the workers who voted for him. Those are the workers who went to his rallies. We all know the reason that Donald Trump won this election in such a surprising fashion is he crashed through what we call that blue wall of states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And so every meeting I've ever been in with Donald Trump, he always mentions the auto workers and the steel workers and the coal miners. He cares very personally about the economic well-being of those voters, as well he should.
Steve, a lot of questions about where the market is going. Have we peaked?
Boy, look, I'm still very bullish on the U.S. economy. We are seeing some weakness now in the housing sector of the economy that concerns me a little bit. Interest rates are rising, so that makes new housing more expensive to get a mortgage. But the other sectors of the economy look really strong, I think.
He is not buying this idea that we are headed for a recession, pointing to the 7 million jobs open today that still need to be filled. As for the GM plants, they are slated to shut down by the end of next year. The auto company expects to save some $6 billion by the end of 2020. That's the latest from the White House. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Thanks, Ben. Well, as you just heard Ben report about the GM layoffs, trade and the economy and the upcoming G20 summit, they were all among the topics at a wide-ranging White House press briefing today. The first in nearly 2 months, and the first since the White House issued new rules for reporters after that testy post-midterm election exchange between the president and the press. No fireworks today, though.
And if I could ask a follow-up, the president doesn't believe the warnings in the climate report. The president doesn't believe the CIA when it comes to Jamal Khashoggi. The president doesn't believe the intelligence community when it comes to Russia meddling. Why doesn't he have faith in his advisors?
No, that's not true. The president has a great deal of faith in the intelligence community and certainly in the team that he has assembled around him. However, I've addressed the climate report. There's really nothing else to add on that front.
At the press briefing today, Trump's national security advisor John Bolton also announced the president will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's Premier Xi Jinping at the G20 summit later this week.
Well, the number of migrants at our southern border is surging, with experts predicting the caravan could grow to more than 9,000 in the coming days. Amber Strong brings us a look at the Trump administration's response to recent protests in Tijuana.
The use of tear gas against migrants rushing the border Sunday is raising questions. President Trump defended U.S. Border Patrol's decision to use the gas against protesters, and it's becoming clear it's not the first administration to do so.
They were being rushed by some very tough people, and they used tear gas, and here's the bottom line. Nobody's coming into our country unless they come in legally.
About 8,500 migrants are waiting in Tijuana while the U.S. processes their request for asylum. According to the Department of Homeland Security, approximately 1,000 tried to rush the fencing, throwing rocks and bottles at agents. Tear gas, while used domestically by police, has also been used by Border Patrol agents under past administrations, too.
5 years ago, under the Obama administration in 2013, a similar migrant rush of the border at the San Ysidro crossing, same place, with the same results. The Border Patrol used tear gas, they used pepper spray, pepper balls, and they also even used a taser at one point against a group of hundreds of migrants, including women, children, and old people.
CBN News contributor Chuck Holton, who has reported exclusively from inside the caravan, says the actions of some make the asylum process harder for others.
These migrants who are trying to come in legally by coming to the port of entry are having to stand in incredibly long lines. We're talking about maybe up to 8 or 10 days camping on the sidewalk on the bridge in line waiting for that preliminary interview. And that's because there are so many people that are crossing the border illegally that they're jumping the line in front of those people doing it the right way.
So instead of 10 days, Holton says the wait there in Tijuana could increase to about 3 to 4 months, taking a toll on the city and the migrants themselves, leaving some of the president's biggest defenders calling for compassion.
We treat these people, these economic refugees, as if they're zombies from The Walking Dead. We are a nation of immigrants. These are desperate people. They walk 2,000 miles. Why? Because they want to rape your daughter or steal your lunch? No, because they want a job.
The question is how to go about it. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Well, for all things politics, we now turn to senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon and chief political analyst David Brody. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, John.
Well, we all have seen the Geraldo clip where he talks about getting emotional, saying that he felt like he was choking on gas watching what was happening with the asylum seekers. Does he have a point? Are Americans putting politics before people, Jennifer?
Well, I think it's important for Americans to remember that these are people. These are people, and if you've ever been to Central America, you know that the conditions are dire. I would be in the caravan, honestly, if I would lived in some parts of Central America. However, we have to, and let's be clear, Democrats are always better at making the emotional argument. However, I think it's important for Americans to remember that Congress sets the laws of the United States, and it's the executive's job to enforce them. And so what we're seeing is we've seen Congress kick this can down the road, down the road, down the road, down the road. Well, we're down the road. And this has become a crisis, and the president is having to deal with it.
That's exactly right, Jennifer. You stole my thunder, but not the first time in a good way. But it's all about Congress, and that's why Donald Trump and presidents before him, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, do your job, Congress, hello. Right. And they haven't. So you've got almost, as we talked about yesterday in Fifth Nation, you have about 1 million folks in a backlog at the border. So why are a lot of these folks going through illegal points of entry, or in other words, they're crossing the border illegally? Because they don't want to wait. Well, here's the thing. Regarding the Geraldo statement real quick, we see the tear gas and the families and the children and the mothers. But what you don't see are the children and the mothers that are actually online waiting to do it the legal way, the right way, that are waiting the 4, 5, 6 months to get into this country. That story you're really not seeing as much, if at all.
Yeah, fair process for everyone, the same treatment. Ahead of the midterms, this was, of course, a big issue that President Trump and a lot of Republicans ran on. David, do you think, how heavily do you think it did weigh on the midterms?
I think it weighed to a degree. I think it helped at the margins. I mean, if you look at the number one issue is healthcare, number two is immigration. 23% of folks believed that immigration was their number one issue, or said it was their number one issue. And out of that, about 78% went for Republicans. But on healthcare, which was the number one issue, about 74% went for Democrats. So, I mean, you know, at some point, you know, you're looking at a couple percentage points potentially as a swing. And therefore, did it make a difference? Okay, yes, but with a big old asterisk to say, maybe not as much as people are making out today.
Well, I do think, you know, it was Justice Kavanaugh who fired up Republicans, got them engaged in the midterms, and I think it was the caravan that kind of carried them to the polls, if you will.
Speaking of the polls, with GM laying off 15,000 employees and the recent instability in the stock market, Jennifer, how bad is this for President Trump, given that he has really based his success so far in the White House on the economy?
Well, it's not good. It's certainly not good. I mean, he touts this all the time. This is going to be an issue certainly in 2020 either way. But I think if you know, let's dial it back and remember that the U.S. taxpayers invested billions upon billions in GM about a decade ago. They lost billions on that. You know, by design, they lost billions on that investment. And so, you know, I think this is not good for GM as well. It's bad for the American worker. It's also bad for GM. But I will also say, if you look at American manufacturing jobs in America, the graph goes like this since President Trump took office. So this is not a good story for President Trump. It's not a good story for the people who are losing their jobs. However, U.S. manufacturing is certainly more robust than we've seen it probably in the past 15, 20 years.
Sure. And I think there's two sides to this. In 2020, look, two of the plants that could be closing, and remember, could be closing, not definitely going to be closing, Michigan and Ohio. He won Michigan. Trump won Michigan by 11,000 votes. So that's a concern. But I thought what was really interesting, what Donald Trump told GM CEO yesterday, he said, you have messed with the wrong person. And we know Donald Trump isn't playing around, or as we say in New York, he ain't playing. But we say a few other things, but I'll say that one here. But the point is that I agree with Donald Trump on this. I think they have messed with the wrong person. That's a phone call to a couple of his business buddies to say, okay, GM messed me up. Now I need you to pony up a little bit more in terms of jobs and all of that. So we'll see how this plays out.
Well, Sarah Sanders, she held her first press conference this afternoon in 2 months. This is post Jim Acosta and that whole dust up. Do you think we're in a new age when it comes to the White House press corps, Jennifer?
I do. Now we have rules that we didn't have before in terms of how many questions you can ask. I think that it's definitely a new era, but it's been a new era since President Trump took office. And let's be honest, this is the most important fact, I think, when we talk about the press and this president. This president is the most accessible president in history. We see him all the time. He walks to Marine One and he talks for 15 minutes and makes news, and this happens on a weekly basis. And so I think that has always been the case. The president promised to turn the press shop upside down. He did. He also boldly points out the things that conservatives have been concerned about for decades, which is that they don't feel like the media gives them a fair shake. The media treats them as bigots. The media treats them as backwards idiots. And he points that out on a daily basis. And so this is the new reality.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you know, mainstream media, it's time to grow up. Look, do your job. In other words, do you really need a Sarah Sanders briefing every day to do your job? Go ahead and do your job. And it's called shoe leather journalism. It's called, I don't know, maybe call a source that's been very leaky out of this White House. So that's not a problem. And as Jennifer said, the most accessible, better be careful when we say successful. That's another show for another deplorable audience, but not here. But just accessible. And it's all true. You put it all together. Is Sarah Sanders the be-all and end-all of this? Look, I believe that if you took the cameras away from the Jim Acostas of the world, and I'm talking about the nightly news cameras where they focus in on what the reporter asked, and then all of a sudden if you took that camera away and was just focused on Sarah Sanders, I think that would do more damage to them than anything else we've seen so far.
Yeah, say goodbye to the grandstanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, David and Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the next government shutdown may be right around the corner.
CBN congressional correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now from Capitol Hill. Abigail, the countdown is on with only 10 days to go for Congress to come to a decision on a year-end spending package. Are we headed for another government shutdown?
Well, Jenna, we very well could be. Before Thanksgiving, lawmakers felt pretty good that they would get these spending bills passed by December 7th before we reach that partial government shutdown deadline. But now some Republican senators like Lindsey Graham are saying that since the caravan has hit the southern border, that it is a different world than before they left D.C., and they now want to fight harder to get the president the $5 billion he wants for the border wall. So that could be a possible hang-up that could cause a shutdown. But Democrats say if we do see that Republicans are still in charge of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So if we're heading to a partial shutdown, it is the Republicans' fault.
And Abby, I understand today that freshman Democrats met behind closed doors to discuss leadership within their caucus. Do you know anything about that and Nancy Pelosi's bid to become Speaker again during the next session of Congress?
Well, I know that the vote is tomorrow on who Democrats in the House will nominate to be their next speaker. Right now, I think Nancy Pelosi is the only person running, so she is likely to win the nomination. But then there still could be somebody who comes forward and opposes her in the beginning of January when they vote on the House floor. But as of now, while there is opposition, there's no one that has come forward to run against her.
And Abigail, just about 30 seconds left, but the president, he's been pushing this bipartisan criminal justice reform bill. A version of that has already passed in the House. Where does it stand in the Senate?
Well, today on the Hill, Vice President Mike Pence and Jared Kushner were meeting with Senate Republicans to push for this criminal justice reform bill. But Leader McConnell said that, well, he has agreed to whip the bill and see where the Republican senators stand, not just on the substance of the bill, but if they want to see it passed by the end of this year. But he made it clear today that it is not in his top 3 priorities, that he still needs to fund the government, get the farm bill passed, and work on a few other things ahead of this criminal justice reform bill. But he has agreed to feel out the Republican senators and see if they want to go forward. If it does come to the Senate floor, it is looking like it will pass with about 80 votes, overwhelming support. There is a small opposition led by Senator Tom Cotton, who thinks that he doesn't want to see prison sentences shortened, but he wants to work instead on prison reform and what happens getting prisoners back on their feet after they leave. So he's very opposed to this bill, but we'll see if they make it in the next 10 days.
All right. Thanks, Abby. We'll be right back after this break.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
Well, Christian and conservative college students are increasingly reporting being silenced on college campuses. New stats reveal that's causing a growing number to keep their religious and political thoughts to themselves.
Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon reports on this growing trend.
If you're a college student and think you'll be seen as a bigot, less intelligent, or punished for sharing your beliefs or opinions, it's not surprising more and more students are self-censoring their constitutionally protected speech. An annual survey by Yale's William F. Buckley program finds a majority feel intimidated sharing their ideas, opinions, or beliefs when they're different from their professors. Even more feel intimidated if those views differ from classmates.
I have talked to students who say, you know what, we talk about politics in our dorm room with the door locked, because we're scared of people telling on us.
Nikki Neely of Speech First keeps track of these free speech restrictions on college campuses.
If you think that you're going to get in trouble because your views are considered bigoted, hateful, defamatory, I mean, you know, of course you're not going to talk about them.
The survey also finds nearly 60% of students want speakers who have a history of using so-called hate speech banned from campus. And a third believe physical violence is justified to stop someone from making hateful or racially charged statements. The problem is determining what's offensive can be different for everyone. Students at some schools can even face punishment for private conversations.
There are portals on university websites where you can go in, you can type down, I heard Joe use this term in a classroom, walking down the hallway, I found it offensive and I think it should be investigated. And then that student is called in for a hearing.
So why is this happening now? Neely suggests it's a new generation of students created by helicopter parenting, bubble wrapping kids, and trophies for everyone.
So if you have grown up thinking that you're right and the first time you're told you're wrong or that you're being challenged on your views is when you're 18, of course there's going to be an existential crisis on campus.
Some schools, like the University of Chicago, are taking a stand for the First Amendment. In this letter to the class of 2020, the Dean of Students writes, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces. Diversity of opinion and background," he continues, "is a fundamental strength of our community." More than 50 colleges and universities have made similar statements, and Neely suggests students find out where schools stand on speech before deciding where to attend. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Well, Dr. Donald Sweeting is the president of Colorado Christian University, and he joins us now for more. Dr. Sweeting, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
You know, this issue of suppression of speech on college campuses, how much of an issue is that?
Well, I think it's huge. And it's coupled with a lot of other things. The atmosphere on university campuses is changing radically as we disinvite speakers, as we have safe spaces, as we really shut down debate. And that's the one place where you should be able to debate and discuss ideas. So I tell people, this is the best time to be the president of a Christian university. This is a crazy time to be the president of a university in the United States because of so much insanity that we're seeing in the university world.
Certainly a lot of insanity. Now, you're in Colorado, which just elected its first openly gay governor. Christians, of course, can be tolerant, but are others is culture tolerant of Christians?
Well, this is where authors write about the new intolerance of tolerance, where or the illiberal liberalism, where liberalism is shutting speech down and it's being what it was not created to be. That's why we're having this discussion about what's happening on university campuses, right?
Yeah. On the topic of religious freedom, Colorado Christian has been outspoken and supported Jack Phillips, the man who refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. Right. Talk about the school's involvement in that case.
Yeah, Jack's a friend of ours, and he's in the same town we're in, so this has been very close to home. He's a committed believer. Jack serves anybody who walks in his shop. That's what most people don't understand. He'll bake a cake for anybody, but what they asked him to do was to message the cake according to things that he doesn't believe in. So he said, I don't make Halloween cakes. I don't make cakes that celebrate divorce or talk about violence against people. And because I'm a Christian, a committed Christian, and I believe in marriage as God designed it, I don't make cakes that celebrate homosexual marriage.
On another topic, recreational marijuana is now legal in Colorado. Colorado Christian did a study recently that found that for about every $1 gained in tax revenue, Coloradans spent more than $4 to mitigate some of the adverse effects. Do you think Colorado is on somewhat of a downward moral spiral?
Well, I lived in Colorado, then I moved to Florida for 6 years, and I just came back 2 years ago. And I was so saddened because I love our state, but it seemed like the downtown was like Amsterdam, where, you know, burned out. With a lot of people just looking lost. So we have celebrated something and promoted something that's making a lot of money, positive side for some, But the science and the studies are going in the opposite direction, saying this is bad. It's bad for the state. It's bad for the students of Colorado, the kids of Colorado. It's bad for safe driving. It's bad in so many ways. But this clash, the science going this way, money going this way, right now money's winning.
Real quick question, we're short on time, but really feel it's important that we ask, what can individual Christians do to take a stand for religious freedom in their own cities, in their own communities?
That's a great question, and you got to realize that this is an issue that's coming to your state. It's not just California, it's not just Colorado, but it's coming to you. So please be informed about religious liberty. Persuade young people. Teach them about the Constitution, why we have a Constitution, what it means. Teach them virtue. Encourage your pastors to wake up on this. They cannot be passive on religious liberty. This is a Pauline moment. And by that I mean where Paul said, I appeal to Caesar. We have to do that. We can't be passive. And so many pastors, I know that they don't want politics to be our first issue, but they have pulled out, gone to the other extreme of silence. And that can't happen. And then I guess finally I'd say, you know, when schools like our school is in the news because of this, support those who take a stand and pray for a great awakening, because that's what Christians, I think, that's our hope. We know in the past the Holy Spirit has been poured out on people and in eras like the first Great Awakening, the second, and it's been a game changer. And quite frankly, we need a game changer.
That's right. Dr. Sweeting, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
We'll be right back.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
Well, you've heard of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but what about Giving Tuesday?
Well, Giving Tuesday is a global day of charitable giving, but what makes people want to give? According to a new Barna Group survey, when it comes to Christians, 62% say their giving can make a difference. 45% heard a moving story that led them to give, and 34% have a relationship with or know the person behind the mission or charity to which they give.
It is biblical. It's greater to give than to receive.
That's right, although some people like the inverse. But
who doesn't like a gift?
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for today's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.